We are diving deep into a tragic, complex, and just intensely public case that unfolded on the high seas only a few weeks ago.
Mm.
The death of 18-year-old Anna Kepner aboard the Carnival Horizon cruise ship back in November.
And this is one of those cases where you have this, huge public curiosity clashing with some really dense legal complications.
And the family conflict is already playing out in court filings. I mean, criminal charges haven't even been filed yet.
Well, and that procedural detail right there is what makes this just a fascinating, though obviously heartbreaking deep dive.
Right.
When you have a U.S. citizen who dies on a ship in international waters, the jurisdiction, it just immediately defaults to the federal system.
So we're talking about an FBI homicide investigation.
Exactly. And they operate on a very different, frankly, a much slower timeline than, say, your local police department would.
That distinction is so important for you, our listener, to get. Our mission today is really to cut through the noise, the speculation, and just synthesize the confirmed facts we have as of December 1st. We're going to focus on the official homicide ruling, the pretty shocking forensic findings, and this unusual legal status of the 16-year-old stepbrother who is, well, the sole focus.
And if you're following this in the news, you might be thinking, why is this moving so slowly? It's because the FBI, they're not just looking for an immediate arrest based on probable cause. They are building an airtight, meticulous case for a federal grand jury.
A grand jury indictment.
Right. And that process, it involves gathering every single scrap of evidence, digital footprints, forensic analysis, you name it. It all has to be perfect.
Okay, so let's unpack the timeline of the incident itself, because it is incredibly tight.
It is.
Anna was last seen late on the night of November 6th. She'd been with her paternal grandparents, I think near the casino, and she told them she was feeling sick and went back to the cabin.
The cabin she was sharing with her stepbrother.
Right. And then the next morning, November 7th, around 11:00 a.m., a housekeeper goes in for just a standard cleaning.
And this is, of course, the moment of discovery. This is where it goes from a potential medical issue to a full-blown crime scene.
And the details of that discovery are just horrifying. I mean, they show a clear effort to hide what happened.
They do.
The housekeeper found Anna's body, but not out in the open. It was actively concealed.
It was wrapped in a blanket, shoved under the bed.
And then covered with life vests, of all things.
That concealment effort is, that's the first critical piece of evidence. And it's so legally significant.
Why is that?
Because hiding a body like that, under a bed, trying to obscure it, investigators see that as what they call consciousness of guilt.
Meaning, you did something wrong.
Exactly. It suggests the reaction wasn't, panic and a call for help. It was an attempt, a calculated one, to hide the death.
So the medical examiner, they officially recorded the time of death at about 11:17 a.m. on November 7th.
Right.
And the biggest update, the one that changes everything, is that our sources confirmed the final ruling. Anna Kepner's death is now officially a homicide.
And that ruling takes us right into the forensics, which are probably the most graphic and maybe the most damning details we have.
They really are. The death certificate lists the cause as mechanical asphyxia.
And it specifically states she was mechanically asphyxiated by other persons.
But the investigators shared an even more specific detail with the family about how that happened.
They did. They confirmed the injuries on her neck were consistent with a bar hold.
A bar hold.
Yeah.
When we talk about that, we're not talking about something random, are we? Can you kind of clarify what that means?
No, it's a highly specific grappling technique. You see it in martial arts, in wrestling. It's where you press your forearm directly across the windpipe.
Wow.
It's designed to subdue someone very, very quickly. The fact that they found bruising consistent with that specific action, it suggests this wasn't just some random scuffle. It was a targeted physical maneuver.
So if the stepbrother had any kind of, wrestling or martial arts training, that detail suddenly becomes huge.
It speaks volumes. It suggests the violence wasn't accidental, but a very sudden, very technical chokehold.
And you have to pair that specific forensic finding with the other evidence.
The digital and the visual evidence, yes. Leaks, confirmed from the grandparents themselves, showed that the ship's surveillance footage captured the 16-year-old stepbrother as the only person.
The only person.
The only one seen entering or exiting that cabin during the critical window, between when Anna went back to the room and when her body was found.
So that effectively isolates him at the scene.
It does. But, let's be fair. A good defense attorney is going to point out that the video only shows who went in and out. It doesn't show what happened inside the room.
Of course.
But when you combine the forensic fact, this like professional style chokehold, with the fact that No one else was seen going in or out.
Hmm.
Well, the prosecution has a very, very strong circumstantial case.
So we have the crime, and we have the suspect isolated at the scene. But this is where the story just gets so layered and tense. The narratives about their relationship, they're completely contradictory.
And this is going to be the absolute heart of the conflict in court. On one side, you have the story from the stepbrother's father and the grandparents on the ship.
Right.
They were telling everyone publicly that Anna and her stepbrother were super close. They used the phrase two peas in a pod.
They even made a point of saying they chose to share a cabin, right? Like, they were offered separate rooms but wanted to be together.
Exactly. Suggesting this high degree of comfort, this normal, happy sibling relationship.
Which paints a picture that makes this violence seem just totally out of the blue, inexplicable.
Right. But then you pivot to the counter-narrative. This one's coming from Anna's biological mother and her friends. And it suggests something much, much darker.
And there's a specific anecdote here.
A very specific one. An ex-boyfriend of Anna's claimed he was on a video call with her late that night.
The night she died.
Yes, late November 6th, or very early November 7th.
Yeah.
And he said she seemed uncomfortable. Afraid was the word he used. It gave him a really bad feeling.
And the sources also mention these sort of generalized reports of an alleged obsession from the stepbrother's side.
Right, so you can see the two narratives forming. The defense will push the two peas in a pod story to argue this was a tragic, accidental explosion.
And the prosecution...
The prosecution will use that ex-boyfriend's testimony and this whole fear narrative to try and establish a pattern of tension. To suggest this was the end result of something much more sinister.
And the court is going to have to decide which one is real.
Was this a sudden sibling squabble that went horribly wrong, or was it violence that came from a deeper pre-existing tension? The answer to that question basically determines the charge.
And this tension, it didn't wait for criminal court. It spilled over into civil court almost immediately, which is actually how we found out the stepbrother was even a suspect.
It's just a fascinating turn. The public only knows he's formally a suspect because of court filings from his own biological father.
In a custody battle with the mother, Chantal Hudson. Wait, so the father filed motions claiming his son was a murder suspect and that the mother's other kids were at risk. He's the one who put that on the public record.
That's right. It was a huge legal maneuver. And it forced the information out before the FBI was ready to announce a thing.
Wow.
It was a move driven by, fear and concern for other kids, but it cracked open the entire investigation. And in response to that, the stepmother, Chantal Hudson, she made her own dramatic, strategic move.
She invoked her Fifth Amendment right.
Her right against self-incrimination.
Yes.
In the civil custody case.
Which is a textbook legal defense strategy. It shows you just how seriously her side is taking the looming federal criminal case.
So by pleading the Fifth, she's refusing to testify or provide evidence in her custody hearing.
Because anything she says, any record she provides, could potentially be handed over to federal prosecutors and used against her son.
So she's basically sacrificing her position in the civil custody fight to build this constitutional firewall around her son for the murder case. That's a perfect way to put it. The optics look terrible in the short term, but the legal strategy is sound if you're protecting against a federal conviction.
It just shows how high the stakes are.
The defense attorneys are already operating as if an indictment is coming any day now.
So let's talk about the defense they seem to be building. What's the stepbrother's actual story of what happened?
Well, according to family sources, when he was initially questioned and then later hospitalized for observation, he claimed he does not remember what happened.
And doesn't remember.
Right. He reportedly said he was in an emotional mess, maybe a catatonic state after the incident.
That sounds less like a straightforward denial and more like a very specific legal strategy.
It absolutely is. This is the core of what we think the defense will be. This alleged memory loss, this dissociation. It's designed to be the central pillar of their argument.
How so?
They'll argue this wasn't premeditated murder that requires men's, criminal intent. They'll say this was a sudden, spontaneous event, a blackout rage or a psychotic break.
And if they can successfully argue a blackout, what does that get them legally?
It mitigates the charge. The goal would be to knock a federal murder charge down to manslaughter.
Because manslaughter doesn't require that same level of intent.
Exactly. They would argue the act itself, that specific bar hold, was done in a state of diminished capacity, and that hiding the body wasn't consciousness of guilt, but just post-incident shock and dissociation. It's a key distinction that could be the difference between life in prison and a much shorter sentence.
Which puts so much pressure on the digital evidence the FBI is still analyzing.
Mm.
We know they're looking at the electronic door log, the key card data.
And the cell phone records from both teens. Those records are the definitive truth teller.
They'll show everything.
Everything. When the door was last opened, when the phones were last used, and critically, when that altercation must have happened. Once they can marry the physical evidence with that precise digital timeline, the case goes to the grand jury.
So, to sum up where we are right now, as of early December, we have a confirmed homicide, very specific and violent forensic evidence, that chokehold and video that isolates the suspect.
Right. But at the same time, you have this intense legal battle in the civil courts and a defense strategy that's being built around memory loss.
Which brings us back to the pace of it all. The question for you, the listener, is probably why we're all forecasting a federal indictment is coming, but we're still waiting weeks, maybe even months.
It all comes down to that federal grand jury system.
It's just a different process.
Totally different. Unlike a state case where an arrest can happen pretty fast on probable cause, federal prosecutors take their evidence to a grand jury. It's a secret proceeding. They have to present an overwhelming case to a panel of citizens just to get the formal charge.
They have to have everything lined up perfectly beforehand.
Every I dotted, every T's crossed, especially for a crime that happened outside of traditional state lines. So the delay isn't a lack of evidence. It's the methodical, complex process of making sure that charge is airtight for a federal trial.
It's a tension, isn't it, between the clock of justice and the clock of public scrutiny.
It really is.
You know, given the extreme specificity of that forensic evidence, the bar hold, and the stepbrother's claim of total memory loss, the ultimate question for a jury is going to be this. Can a person execute such a specific technical act of violence while they're supposedly in a blackout rage? The defense has to somehow make those two things make sense together, and that is a fundamental challenge we'll be watching as the FBI prepares its case.